Well, obviously, over the last couple of weeks, things change so rapidly. And of course, heading into next week, we're looking at what alert level 4 means for our processing capacity, as well as what that flow-on effect will mean to store prices. But the big question is our international markets ready for this backlog of product? We're joined tonight on Sarah's Country by AgriHQ's Senior Sheep and Beef Analyst, Mel Croad. Mel, welcome to the program. Now, I suppose, can we just start to set the scene around where capacity has been over the last week and what it generally looks like going into next?
Yeah, hi Sarah, thanks for that. I think we've all been quite well versed over the last 4 weeks whilst we've been in lockdown that capacity has been reduced. We've heard anywhere from 50 to 70% depending on whether it being sheep or cattle. We are also hearing through this time that a lot of the companies have actually worked really hard to get those efficiencies in place and have actually probably lifted from those first initial capacity percentages. So I guess it's very early days. We saw earlier in the week that under level 3 from next week, spacing at the processors could drop from 2 metres to 1 metre. Our AgriHQ analysts we've been on the phone talking to contacts just to get a view of what next week's going to look like. I think some are still, getting a little bit of guidance on policies, practices, but there does appear to be mixed positions on expanding capacity. We're only just getting used to the level 4 lockdown and those restrictions, and it just feels like here's some new changes. I guess it's just a testament to how fast things are moving.
I'm sure sheep and beef farmers aren't getting used to the fact that they can't get stock away, and they'd really like to see that play out. I mean, of course, David Savard from Alliance was speaking to Jamie Mackay earlier this week, and there seems to be such differing rules or messages coming out of our processors on how much they can speed up and by what stage. So farmers are getting very confused and sadly going back to playing the field.
Yes, there have been differing signals. We did have, one of the larger processors saying earlier in the week that they could move to 90 to 100% capacity from as early as next week. I guess others have been a little bit less bullish. And some of the early indications we're seeing is that some may not necessarily take advantage of the drop in spacing requirements. We're hearing some are saying, the efficiency gains that they've been making would actually match what level 3 would look like. I think some of the guidance that they're looking to gather is coming down to keeping staff safe. And, we really can't overlook that. The key here is that we need to increase throughput, but we also need to maintain the safety of the staff at the processing plants. And look, a lift in capacity also means a lift in staffing numbers, and that's not going to happen overnight. But I do know what you mean. I think if meat companies are going to take different stances on throughput, then they've got to have a really clear message to their suppliers. There is nothing worse than a farmer struggling to get stock away because they don't understand the stance their company has chosen to take when they look across the fence and their neighbours getting away all their stock because their plant chose a differing view. There's a lot of stress and anxiety out there at the moment, so we've really got to make sure those messages are clear.
So what sort of impact is the drought playing in all of this?
Oh, look, I really do feel that if large parts of the country weren't still, suffering from drought conditions, particularly this close to winter, that the spotlight probably wouldn't be shining so brightly on the processors. We might be actually more interested about how our meat is selling into overseas markets, but all of a sudden there's just been this massive emphasis placed on throughput, on reduced capacity, on pricing downside at the Farmgate, and there's been a lot of negativity from it all as well. It's certainly brought out a lot of experts, and I think unfortunately the drought's completely magnified the slowdown that COVID has placed on the industry. It's brought in a lot of emotion too. And I guess bottom line, if the drought wasn't such having such a presence, then, we probably wouldn't be so concerned by what level 3 might look like. We might be able to be processing that stock a little more fluidly than what we are, but it is just really adding to the pressure both on farm and for processors.
Mel, there's a lot of online transactions that we can visually see how it's affecting Farmgate prices, both prime and store. It's plummeted horrendously in the beef market. So, is it just this complete shortage of winter feed that we're looking down the barrel of, and no one wanting to take any risks?
Absolutely. That there's just been so much uncertainty in the last, not even in the last month, but right through 2020. Farmgate prices have fallen since the lockdown, but look, the fall has been a lot less than what we actually saw through January and February. So in the last 4 weeks, we've seen at a slaughter level sort of anywhere on average from 10 to 30 cents a kilo for cattle, and as much as 30 to 35 cents a kilo for lamb. Now that is a lot, and for lamb it is a very clear break in tradition, but in those first 2 months of the year, we actually saw anywhere from 90 cents to $1.30 a kilo coming out of beef and lamb prices for slaughter. So, I think exporters and processors have been doing their very best in these current, trying conditions. And it has absolutely impacted on the store market. The lack of feed is a big impact. But also, we saw a very strong market last November, December, both at store and slaughter. So a lot of store stock was bought back on a very high market. And unfortunately, those animals have since devalued by quite a substantial amount right through into April. So there is that general feeling of not really wanting to have to offload those store stock and take a massive hit. But then there's also the trouble of actually getting stock into processing plants and just easing all those pressures. So, yeah, there has been some big negative impacts on Farmgate prices, and I would like to think we're hopefully through the worst of it, but we've just got to play this week by week at the moment.
Let's talk about our international markets and the effect of COVID-19, in particular, in the US and ground beef markets, seeing takeaways and drive-thrus reopening. That surely should be able to take a lot of this throughput that we're doing at the moment.
Yeah, we have seen consumers in the US just start to relax a little bit, and yes, the drive-thrus are seeing a pickup in demand and sales, which is great. And that stems from, when we originally went into lockdown, that all the demand was on supermarkets and retail, and eating out or dining out or takeaways sort of fell by the wayside. Unfortunately now in the US market, they're also dealing with very high rates of infection in staff at their processing plants. And that's becoming a real struggle. Look, some of those beef processing plants in the US have daily throughputs of over 6,000 head. Their weekly cattle kill was sitting at over 600,000 head a week or two ago. That's plummeted by 25%, just with the closure of these processing plants. So, yes, they are now looking at, some potential shortages of meat, be it beef, chicken or pork in the US. Cattle can handle a slowdown at processing, but unfortunately for pork and chicken, it does, any slowdown there actually increases the likelihood of on-farm culling. So there's still some really big issues for some of our key markets to work through, and whether we can take any positives or off from that, we're definitely looking and working at whether we can see more beef heading into the US market to support the shortages there and that growing demand for the burgers again. It would be good if we could see a little bit of upside there.
Hey, with the lack of processing capacity in the States, what sort of impact is that having on our competition into, say, China?
The US aren't
Big exporters.
big beef or lamb exporters into China.
Right.
But if we look at just China as a standalone, we have seen improvements in demand for New Zealand products back into China in the last month. It has been a welcoming bright light there. By no means are we seeing prices soar, but just the fact that we've got a market that is determined to get back on its feet and is looking to New Zealand for product is a really positive start. We've got to understand too that we are dealing with softer in-market prices across the vast majority of markets that we put New Zealand lamb and beef into. And that is reflected in our back at our Farmgate prices as well. It's also reflected, I guess, in the fact that we've got to be careful about running at 100% capacity in the next few weeks. We've got to have that capacity balanced with market demand and pricing levels in those key markets. And if markets are open to more product out of New Zealand and being able to capitalise on that by increasing throughputs would be a really great start. And it would be, also the first step to preventing any further downside at the farm gate. But we've just got to be really careful that the market's in that position now for us to up, up our throughputs and up our offerings on those overseas markets.
Thank you so much. As always, balanced and sensible advice from Mel Croad, Senior Sheep and Beef Analyst for AgriHQ.
This is Sarah's Country.